Hi, this is Tekla. Welcome to week 4. We're halfway through once we get done with this week. So this week the topics are ACEs, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, which are strongly linked actually with health outcomes. You'd think just mental health, but there is actually strong research that you'll be reading about this week linking the actual health outcomes like diabetes, heart disease, stroke, other things like that, to early childhood adverse experiences. We'll be looking at resiliency. How do people overcome those early experiences and actually improve their health by becoming resilient? How we can help families, children, and ourselves become more resilient. And we'll be looking at the code of ethics again. We looked at it a little bit. It was in the assignments in week 1. We didn't really have time to cover it. People were still coming into the class, so we're going to touch on that again this week, looking at ethical practice. So here we are with the week 4. All right, so you're in week 4 explained. That's what this video is right now. And then when we look at the objectives and assignments for week 4, those are to understand what ACEs are and how they affect development, health, stability, all those kinds of outcomes. Describe resiliency and understand what factors affect childhood and then also adult resiliency. Read and understand the Community Health Worker Code of Ethics. So we'll be going through content, videos. We'll have our Zoom meeting like normal on Wednesday. You'll be posting like normal to the discussion board, taking the quiz, and completing the assignments. So when we look at the content for this week, there are some pages for the Community Health Worker Code of Ethics. That is 159 to 162. Again, it is mostly just bulleted, like there are ethics like honesty, confidentiality, scope of ability, and training. So there isn't really much to read. It's more just becoming familiar with what those ethics are, what those values are, and see if there's any places where it doesn't overlap with home visiting or if you feel like it's really in line with the work that you are doing or that you will be doing. There's a quick pyramid here that looks at what Vincent Felitti is the person who came up with ACEs. He's down here in the articles. And this just shows sort of a pyramid of a visual conceptualization of how ACEs affect the lifespan and actually result in early death is what he found. So if you don't know much about ACEs, you're probably going to want to start down here in the articles. So what are the long-term consequences of adverse childhood experiences, and then how do they affect adult health? There's also information from the American Academy of Pediatrics about ACEs. And then there's some information here about pathways to resilience, again, by that same researcher who's from NMSU. Finally, I would like all of you to actually print this here off and take it. It is the list of ACEs, so it's before 18. Have you experienced any of these things? And then on the back side or on the second sheet is a resiliency questionnaire. So it looks at both what are adverse things that have happened to you and what resiliency have you built or what resiliency was built into your childhood. And there's no points associated with this, but I would love if you look at your questionnaire. It doesn't need to be shared with anyone, but if you can please think about, like, how has your life prepared you for where you are? And imagine someone who either has really different experiences than you. So, whether you had high or low ACEs, high or low resiliency early on and have built resiliency or have not. Think about someone who's had really different life experiences on some of those aspects and just imagine what that might be like for them. Because when you're in home visiting, you will meet people who have similar experiences to you and people who have really different experiences. So sometimes it can help us think through, like, if that had happened to me, what would my life view have been? Or if this hadn't happened to me, what would my life view have been? All of that. The videos for week 4 are great, I think. If you don't know much about ACEs, I would probably start here with Dr. Harris. She gives an overview of ACEs, really talking about the effect on children and how she thought, having learned about ACEs, that people would really be making a lot of changes, which really isn't happening yet. in our society and in pediatrics. So if you want to get fired up, that's a great video to watch. I like this video. This is Charles Hunt talking about how he experienced many ACEs as a young child and then grew up to really move forward in his life. And then there's just this sort of 5 points to build resilience. If you feel like you could actually benefit from more resilience, or you would like to be able to give key points to families that you visit around resilience and you're not quite sure how to break that down into something easy and quick, this video is 5 minutes and it will give you an idea of how to do that, I think. All right. So then we've got the discussion for week 4, which is, so looking at that ACEs and resilience questionnaire, and again, you don't need to share anything about yourself. Share one ACE that you feel like you could impact as a home visitor. And how could you do that? And how would it look in your visits? How does it look, or how could it look? Something you can have an impact on with the ACE side of it. And then on the resiliency side, think about people you know in your life, and they can be in home visiting or just in general. What 2 key attributes do those people possess that really stand out for you? So give what those are, and then give us 2 strategies that you could use as a home visitor to help build those abilities in families that you visit. So really think that through, what resiliency looks like and how you can help people during visits to build that. And if you feel like you have more resiliency to build, because really we all do at all times, think about how you could work on that for yourself so that you could then share that with families in a more powerful way. So then for read, reflect, and apply, there's a quote here about post-traumatic stress disorder and how it can be expressed, which is physical, emotional, behavior, relationship impacts, cognitively and spiritually. It has huge impacts. And if you feel like you want to know more about it, you can go down here into this information, or you could just go, I love going to YouTube, honestly, and just putting PTSD in and finding out a TED Talk or something else I can watch about that. But if you feel like you've got a basic idea of what PTSD is, based on what you know, what are 3 ways PTSD can impact a parent's ability to be a good enough parent? So that's just like being able to respond well enough that the child-parent relationship is basically solid and supportive. If you were visiting a family and you knew that the parent who stayed home with the child primarily had a PTSD in their history or had that experience, what are 2 drops of information that you would share with that parent? So again, going back to Fan from week 1, drops of information are like a 1-sentence or max 2-sentence drop of information about what you want to tell them. So you might not ever tell this family, hey, I know you've got PTSD, or I know you suffered with PTSD, but just thinking this person might have a high level of trauma, maybe actually does have PTSD or has had PTSD in the past. What are some things that you feel like would be helpful to share with that parent? Write down that either 1 sentence or 2 sentences. So like for me, if I were going to share something, I might just say that sometimes things that have happened to us that we wish hadn't happened allow us to be the best parents. And then I'd ask the parent, how do you see that happening in your life? That's if they'd shared with me what had happened or something like that. So write down the drop and then explain why you'd want to share that with the parent, or just what your follow-up question would be with that parent. In part 2, it talks about sort of community level trauma, which is important to think about because it happens more than we would like it to, right? With natural disasters, violence in the community, that sort of thing. So think about a disaster that you're familiar with and write about how a community health worker or home visitor could address those challenges in a community, sort of at a community level when you're working with someone one-on-one. Again, if you need more information or want more information, here are some good links for that. And then for part 3, turning to ethical practice, looking at that code of ethics. The first ethic in that code is honesty. So give 2 examples about how you embody honesty in your work. How does your program create and maintain trust from your community, which is 2.2 in the list of ethical conduct values? And finally, what are ways that you and the program you work with build the ability to practice cultural humility and ensure respect and anti-discrimination? What additional training would help you or your agency team to practice these values of specifically around cultural humility, respect, and making sure that you're welcoming to all folks coming into your program? So those are the writing topics. Of course, there's a quiz as usual. You can hop into that and find out what that's about. Those may be shifting slightly, so I'm just going to let it be, but go to it and do it. And then the Zoom meeting, again, I'm putting in this part here what we'll be talking about so you can feel prepared for those Wednesday conversations. So for this week, week 4, we'll be focusing on the Code of Ethics. And where and how have you seen resiliency in families or in your community? And how can you help build resiliency as a home visitor? So definitely take some notes as you're reading, viewing, writing, and then come ready to the discussion to think about together and talk about how you all are doing that in your communities, questions that you might have so that you can share your knowledge and expertise with everyone in the class. So I didn't start with my micro practice, which is what I had intended to do. So I'm going to finish with a micro practice. If you've been emailing while listening to my video or checking texts or whatever else, put your phones down. Don't look at your computer other than, me for a minute and just take a deep breath. And we'll do the very short practice of breathing in, I do my best. Breathing out, I let go of the rest. So I'll breathe in and out. You can breathe with me, but you can tell yourself that silently. All right. Thank you. I will see you soon in class.